Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm Sharmeen Ali and I will be your host for this program in the next couple of months, and I will be seeing you and you'll be seeing me 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday at this time at 5 p.m. We are going to be discussing the ongoing developments around the world, the international developments that greatly impact us in Pakistan. To begin with, today we're going to be talking about the very important and volatile situation in Afghanistan, where 65 people today were injured, very badly injured due to a bombing in Kabul. More casualties may be expected further on. This is in the midst of the ongoing talks in Doha between the Taliban and the US government, and President Ashraf Ghani's recent visit in Pakistan last week, also with Prime Minister Imran Khan. A lot of developments are taking place with this situation. So we are going to be discussing this developing topic with our guest today. We also are going to be speaking today about Pakistan's relations with India. India has just extended an effort to resume talks with Pakistan on the Kartarpur corridor, which is a very big gesture of peace between the two countries, and obviously it is a very important and sentimental factor for the Sikh community. This community previously could not access the Kartarpur corridor with visa difficulties and all, and they had to view Kartarpur Sahib, their temple, through binoculars, and now they will have a visa-free corridor to this very important Sikh temple. We will also be talking about the impact on the stock exchange and the stock markets with all the financial and economic developments in the country later on. So today we have with us our guests in the studio who are going to be talking to us about all these very important topics. We have with us AVM Ikramullah Saab. Thank you for joining us. Professor Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, thank you very much for joining us, Professor Saab. And Dr. Faisal is going to be joining us online to speak about the developments in the stock exchanges. I'd like to begin, AVM Saab, with the situation in Afghanistan. What we're seeing today amidst the resumption of talks between the US government and the Taliban in Doha. This is a very positive step. Naturally, this is something very important, that militancy should stop in Afghanistan. It's important for Pakistan's security as well. So these ongoing attacks, what can we expect that, when will we see these tapering down? What do you think about this?
You see, while the 7th round of talks between Taliban and the US continues in Doha, there are 4 subjects or demands which are lying on the negotiating table.
Right.
1 is by the Taliban and 3 are by the Americans. While Taliban are seeking withdrawal of foreign forces from Afghanistan, the Americans are seeking 3 things. Firstly, they would want the Taliban to commit that the Afghan soil will not be used against the Americans or American allies through proxies or terrorists being hosted by Taliban. Then, of course, they want a ceasefire in Afghanistan, and of course, they want the Taliban to talk to the Kabul regime.
Right.
And in this round, they are focusing only on the first 2, that is the withdrawal of forces and, of course, a ceasefire. Not the ceasefire, but of course, the commitment of the Taliban to not allow their soil to be used. And the ceasefire and the negotiation with the Kabul regime are the 2 very difficult or tough subjects for them to handle at the moment, and they are leaving them for maybe the next round. Now, while the Taliban are in a winning position, they are on the rise, and this essentially happens to be because of their military victories.
Okay.
And they are able to keep their own ranks and files galvanized, united, and working for the same cause. And to be able to achieve that, or to be able to sustain that, they have to maintain a pressure on not only just the Americans, but of course the Kabul regime. And if they cease fire at the moment or they discontinue their activities, there are 2 things that they might happen. First of all, they are likely to face some defections from within the ranks, because all their fighters, they are battle hardened, and this is what they know, this is what they have been trained for, this is what they are skilled at, and they would not want to leave, or they would want to leave Taliban if they agree to a ceasefire in a situation where the demands have not been fulfilled, i.e. complete withdrawal of foreign forces from Afghanistan. So there is a need or a compulsion for Taliban to continue their military actions on this for this reason alone. And then, of course, they're on a winning spree. They like to maintain their pressure. They like to continue to exert their influence not only the Kabul regime but the Afghan people as a whole, and of course the Americans. They want to continue to maybe gain more victories, gain more areas of influence, and be in a more strong position on the negotiating table.
Yes.
So we on that count, we may continue to see such incidents in Afghanistan. But then we cannot ignore the presence of another important player, that is the IS, because we've seen in the recent past, not only in Afghanistan but even in Pakistan, we have had incidents where IS has claimed responsibility for.
Yeah, and also the Taliban are in different factions. They're very tribal and all. They can have breakaway factions. Professor Zafar, I'd like to ask you this. The Taliban, the negotiations that are going on right now with the American government, how successful are these likely to be? How able are the Taliban leadership right now, who are there at the moment, able to contain all the different factions, and how are they certain that all of them are going to cooperate in this process?
My understanding is that Taliban are very much united force. Though, as you correctly pointed out, that they have a different cultures, or what you call it, tribal system, but the tribal system has given way to the Taliban leadership, and generally they enjoy the leadership, or you can say primacy, in the Pashtun areas, and that's why they have a very much, you can say in that area, and they are unified force.
Okay.
Why I'm saying this, that if they were not a unified force, then they were fighting among themselves. And Americans, or you can say the US-led American NATO mission, or other forces which are involved in Afghanistan, definitely they desire to benefit from the friction or fisheries among the Taliban. So if they are not existing, that's why they are lagging behind. Now, second point is where they are heeding. Frankly speaking, this dialogue process seems in a deadlock. It's heading towards a deadlock. From the very beginning, Taliban's maintained one stance, that first, US should withdraw their forces, or foreign forces must be withdrawn, and then we can move ahead. They stick with that, and as a result, they got a lot of benefits, or you can say acceptability. How I can put like this: swap of prisoners, number one, acceptance of their legitimate status as when they accepted their dua office, directly talking. Thirdly, they are not engaging, and they proved, or in a way, they you can say proved that the current unity government or a political system in Afghanistan lacks legitimacy. Why? Because it was engineered, sustained, and still very much dependent on the 4 to 5 billion foreign assistance.
Exactly.
That was by the Americans, but when the Americans started directly talking with the Taliban, they bypassed the Ghani government. So its legitimacy has been questioned. Now this way, what the Americans are demanding, only ceasefire from the Taliban, and they are not coming up. And according to the Americans' own sources, I think last week there was a report published, which was a committee was, you can say, constituted by the Congress of the United States. That is something SAG, their naming is. And in that committee, they have mentioned, it was oversighting this dialogue process with the Taliban. They said that the very complex situation, and they warn that situation is very much, even if there is a peace or not peace, there will be a probability of continuity of a conflict, and many factions will be there.
Exactly.
And the point which I want to here establish is, according to that report, they are also accepting Taliban as a control around more than 50% area.
So what's the guarantee, AVM Sab, that when there is a troop withdrawal, that all these agreements will stay and there will be a permanent ceasefire, and there won't be, Afghanistan won't be a hotbed for militant activity anymore? Because how will the US be sure of that compliance, considering the past that they've had?
I think there are two possibilities here. Firstly, we can assume that Taliban have learned their lesson, in 2001 when their government was ousted, it was essentially because of one reason, i.e. hosting of Al-Qaeda. And over the last 18 years, they have learned that how expensive it can be.
Okay.
So they would automatically be encouraged not to host any such proxy or elements in the country. The second part is who and how would this be ensured?
Exactly.
And for that, of course, first of all, there has to be a negotiated, agreeable settlement within Afghanistan. There is a new government which has legitimacy across the board, and they are able to exert their writ. And for that, I think as of now, Taliban alone may not be in a position to bring that about. So there will have to be some international coalition, be it UN troops, who will be there maybe for peacekeeping till the Taliban government or whichever government next takes shape in Afghanistan, they get into a position where they can control and manage their own country and exercise their writ, and thereby prevent any such elements from cropping up within Afghanistan and being a threat to the region or within Afghanistan.
And then comes the fourth element that we were talking about in these talks, the intra-Afghan dialogue. That seems to be a little bit of a problem right now. What progress do you think they're going to make with that? Because obviously, like you were mentioning, the Taliban don't acknowledge the unity government.
Well, the fact is, as Professor Saab correctly alluded to, that when the Americans started to negotiate with Taliban at the very outset, that was a clear indication that they are prepared to forego or abandon the Kabul regime. Else they would not have attempted this. So merely opening a dialogue with Taliban is clearly letting us know the direction in which the Americans are headed, and it's only a matter of time that they'll have to abandon the Taliban the Afghan regime, and of course
they will have to abandon that
hold new elections in which whichever new political dispensations comes about, while the Taliban continue to maintain that they do not intend to monopolize on power, but they definitely would look forward to a much greater position in whatever setup that does take shape.
Greater political influence for the Taliban.
Yes.
Right.
So if that be, of course, if they have a greater position, they have greater influence, they will have greater responsibility, and if they are coming with a commitment that they will not allow their country to be used again, so it can be expected that they would thereby shoulder that responsibility and make sure that they keep their promise, and whosoever element or factor from within Afghanistan is their partner or as a coalition, I'm sure they'll also be party to the same commitment, and hopefully at least this condition of the Americans would be fulfilled, wherein no proxy would be allowed to operate from Afghanistan. But the fact is that IS is there and it is gaining ground, and when there is peace in Afghanistan, hopefully these fighters, I'm sure some of them are going to defect the Taliban, and who are used to doing nothing else but fighting would go and join IS, which is a very serious concern, not just for Afghanistan but for all countries in the region and in the US. So I think the first point of action would be, as and when this new dispensation comes about, there is peace, there is a new government, would be to jointly, collectively tackle IS, because China should be interested, Russia should be interested, Pakistan should be interested, Iran should be interested, even India should be interested.
It should be like a regional effort.
Yes.
So, Professor Zafar, I would like to ask you this, that what should Pakistan's role be now in all of this? Because obviously we facilitated these talks, and Prime Minister Imran Khan just met with President Ashraf Ghani. They want to make a new start, leave the past behind and go forward with economic prosperity and cooperation between the two countries. So what are the next steps that the Pakistani government needs to make in order to facilitate greater peace and security for the two countries and to promote greater economic cooperation?
I think that Pakistan has already done much, and Pakistan should continue with its existing policy. We have as you very rightly pointed out, that Prime Minister Imran Khan ensured the President Ghani when he was here last week that we provide them a full support. But there is a limitation. President Ghani, when visited Pakistan, though he claimed himself that he has a mandate of the people, his mandate expired in April. And then it was July, and now 28 September. We have to wait and see whether he will get the mandate of the people or not. Second, President Ghani used the lower jirgas to legitimize himself further, but he failed to get any support from the lower jirga, though because lower jirga's participation was very much debatable. Now, keeping in mind that, I think that Pakistan should continue supporting all the peace dialogues. When I say all the peace dialogue, there's a trilateral dialogue going on between Chinese, Pakistanis, and Russians, and then we have another, if you see last Saturday, not this Saturday, last Saturday, I think it was on 22nd, that there were Afghan opposition groups. Some elder Afghan leaders visited Pakistan, and in Burban they had a dialogue. So there was it was reported in the press, South Asia Studio Stability Institute and the Lahore Institute were the holding. Our foreign minister participated, and even at that time we have ensured them that we are trying to engage all the factions. In this context, the most important thing is that, of course, as earlier pointed out, the Daesh is a concern for Pakistan. It has been expanding its tentacles in the South Asia as well. Daesh were involved in the recent attacks in Quetta and the other parts of the Pakistan, including in Sri Lanka, in India. So that's why it's very concerned. But at the same time, everything is linked with the anarchy in Afghanistan. If there is no anarchy, if we can overcome the anarchical situation, there is a probability of peace and everything. You are correct. But here, as I said, the government of Pakistan can only facilitate. The government of Pakistan cannot pressurize the Taliban, and it should not pressurize the Taliban to go on the table and accept Ghani government as a part of it.
Right.
Because when the President Ghani was visiting here, though he was saying about his sovereignty, X, Y, Z, behind the mission was that we should support him in his election campaign in the Pashtun areas, or plus we try to engage the Taliban and facilitate, because it's important to note that Americans are also very much dependent on Pakistan's good offices, because we are the facilitator in the continuity of this dialogue, which is, I think, 8th round is on. So in this context, when we are looking about Pakistan's role is critical but not decisive in this way, and Pakistan should remain satisfied with this role of facilitator rather than as a dictator. Otherwise, it will be a counterproductive for Pakistan.
Right, okay. So what about economic cooperation between the two countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan? How can we improve that? Because naturally, Pakistan's economic stability really does hinge on its relations with its neighbors and economic trade between neighbors. So how can Pakistan move towards that now to facilitate a better economic cooperation?
Well, you see, Pakistan and Afghanistan have long, centuries-old relationship. We are immediate neighbors. We have a long, contiguous border. And trade, business are two activities which actually are a glue or a cement for any relationship. And if the relationship between the two countries have gone sour, it's primarily because we lost this relationship, and we see the amount of trade that we used to have has really dwindled. And as and when hopefully peace returns to Afghanistan, I think this should be the first agenda item to discuss between the two countries, how to resume and increase trade. And as long as we are able to do that, trade, connectivity, in their inclusion in CPAC, I think our interdependence alone would ensure peace between the two countries and separately within each country. And I think this is something that we need to start focusing right now as to how we can improve it, and of course bring the Afghans around, maybe through the office of the Chinese, so that they are more amenable to being part of the CPAC. And another aspect over here is the role of India, because Indians unfortunately so far are adamant on not accepting or objecting to CPAC, but the fact remains that they also stand to benefit a lot from this project.
Absolutely.
And eventually in times to come they would be part of it. And if that happens, then the only objection of Pakistan of allowing Indian imports all the way through Pakistan to Afghanistan, so that can be taken care of, and that is going to strengthen the entire activity a lot more.
Of the entire region.
Yes.
So now that we come to India, the Kartarpur corridor talks are due to begin again. India has offered to resume them in July. Now, this is one gesture of peace between both countries that our Prime Minister Imran Khan made, and then the Indians accepted. And then there was a stalemate in the middle. There was delays. So now that these talks are going to continue, and then they're aiming to open the Kartarpur corridor by the birth anniversary of Baba Guru Nanak, which is in November this year. So how significant do you find this particular development to be, Professor Zafar?
I think that before, if you permit me, give me 1 minute for this, that since 2015 when the CPAC project started, India has been opposing it.
Yeah.
Indian Prime Minister visited China because with China, India has a more than 1 billion legal trade. And he tried to influence the Chinese leadership. And then again and again, Indians were trying. They tried to sabotage this project by engineering, or you can say financing, the terrorist activities in Balochistan. And even recently, when we see there were attack on the Chinese or these kind of the things, all things goes to the India connections. But anyway, having said this,
Yes.
now coming towards the Kartarpur, Prime Minister Imran Khan, when took this initiative, it was a very bold initiative. And at that time, it was not only by the Prime Minister, he took all the stakeholders of the state in Pakistan on the board. Even our armed forces chief went, army's chief
Yes.
was part of that, so that the Indians should not play this, because they ridiculate sometimes. Whenever the political government make initiative, then they spoil themselves and then say, oh, Pakistani law enforcers or the armed forces or the security agencies have been were not comfortable. So everything was, you can say, appropriately addressed at that time. And we were expecting, but it was a very, you can say, a smart movement by the Pakistan, and it was a checkmate to the Prime Minister Modi's this propaganda that Pakistan is not ready to and Pakistan is not initiative. And even in this case, if you see that we were trying to address the religious, or it was what it was termed by the Western media, a religious diplomacy. But it was scuttled again by the hardliners in India, or if you see, again, as you have very rightly pointed out, that they are talking about opening up, or the Indians are coming, let's say, in November.
Yeah.
But I can be optimistic about the outcome, but not very much optimistic. I can be a cautious optimistic. Why
Right.
I'm saying? Because Prime Minister Modi has this policy, or in the last 5 years, what we learned from his previous government, and what I'm expecting on the basis of the trends, Prime Minister Modi will take 1 step forward, 2 steps backward, and
Exactly.
he has communalized the politics in such a way, or radicalized the politics in India such a way, that analysts are now saying that India is today governed by not a democratic or secular forces, but by a radicalized militant forces.
Absolutely.
And which is very much driven by the Hindutva. In such an environment, when we talk about why, let me put like this way, if your first dot is that if you look the Indians, let's say they are opening up the Kartarpur, facilitating the Sikh, that is a religious festival,
Right.
is Hindutva forces are going to permit it,
Yeah.
because they have been not targeting only 14% Muslims in India, they were targeting each and every group in India.
The
That's why
intolerance
everyone is saying
spreading
that
everywhere, right?
minorities are, or minorities' future in a current India, or if this trend continues, that is very much deplorable.
So, AVM Sab, are you also skeptical, like Professor Zafar, about this development and where it's going to lead, and how the relations between India and Pakistan are going to improve going forward? Because the Modi government has now come back, Prime Minister Modi, with a bang, with the large majority of seats in Parliament. So they're here till 2024. We have to work with them. So regardless of our concerns, so how do we see this going forward?
I think I'm a little more optimistic,
Okay.
because despite Mr. Modi and his government being so extremist, so intolerant, so hostile towards minorities, I think they are pragmatic enough to realize that they cannot afford to antagonize their Sikh minority, which other than Kashmir is their soft underbelly. And much that they would want to, of course, not cooperate with Pakistan on this Kartarpur, but this is a compulsion,
Yes,
which they have to accept.
absolutely.
If they don't, then there are far greater security and political risks which Modi government would not be willing to undertake. So I think it is a very good initiative by Pakistan, and the Indian government was certainly caught off guard. While they did maintain that this was an offer originally by India 20 years ago and Pakistan slept over it for such a long time, and then it's nothing new. They were just trying to trivialize or dilute the entire impact. But the fact remains that this is an initiative, a very strong initiative by Pakistan, and we were able to, of course, almost make a checkmate on the Indian. They had to accept it, and they did that. And had they not been willing to pursue it further, they would not have cooperated.
Absolutely.
They would have ended it right then at the opening.
Right.
But they accepted it. They may be unwillingly cooperating, but they are cooperating.
Yeah.
And that is why we have the new date, and now hopefully the talks will continue, and we look forward to seeing that opening in November, inshallah.
Right. Going back to Professor Zafar's skepticism, Prime Minister Modi's, large part of his election rhetoric was anti-Pakistan. So how is he going to now be able to, with his voters, backtrack on that and work towards peace? How do you see that happening in the future?
This is very important because Prime Minister Modi won the election because of the security narrative.
Yeah.
He and his allies, or especially India media, was very supportive, and the military-industrial complex was very much behind him. And as a result, he won the election. If you see in the post-Pulwama, rational people were thinking that India will be going to, or Prime Minister Modi will be going to face a rating problem, but instead from 32, his rating went to 62.
Yeah.
So in that context, he won the election because of this narrative.
Exactly.
Now, how he can lead his nation out of this narrative? It is very questionable. Generally, people say that leaders can lead, but the question is that whether leader is willing, because if he has to lead the Indians out of this narrative, then he has to give them a satisfactory economic policy, which he failed. Then there is still he is determined to purchase, or India is important in the international community, especially in the American policy, in the French policy, or in the Israeli policy, not because of its, you can say, geostrategic location or political significance, but it is very attractive for their military-industrial complexes. Americans have offered India THAAD system and the Patriot Pack 3 if India agreed to give up the S-400 missiles. Russians are there determined to sell. If all these kind of the deals, if you put in front of you, and then you see that on the one side, Modi wants to have a dialogue process. Yes, Kartarpur will start, but whether it will be having a tangible outcome after this or not, that was I was saying that I am skeptical, because Prime Minister Modi's entire philosophy is based on hate, on a division of us and they, and on the basis of that, he earned vote, agreed, as you have, or AVM Sahib was saying, that he has a vast majority, more than 300 seats in the Lok Sabha, so he has a comfortable majority for next 5 years. No fear of within the, you can say, parliament change. But we have to not forget, in India there are many states whose elections are expected in the coming months.
Right.
And if the history is the guidance, in December 2018, when there were state elections, BJP lost in the 3 states against the Congress.
Okay.
And then in the April-May Lok Sabha election or a general election, BJP won. Why against the Congress or the others? Because it has changed the narrative. Now, if the BJP is moving back of this narrative and hatred of Pakistan, the way they have engineered or cultivated, I can use the word, cultivated in the last 2014 election, and then continued till 2019, and again they are cultivating. If the BJP wants to move out of this arrangement, then definitely it's difficult for the BJP, because next maybe the election is Kashmir state election. Follow-up election may be UP election. So if it continue in these kind of the elections,
So it might lose its
it
way.
has to, if it change the narrative, its economic policy had already failed, communalism is on the rise, problems are there, then how it will be going to win the election?
Yeah.
So for Prime Minister Modi, you cannot expect from him sensibility of a statesman. You can expect from him, you can say, shrewdness of a politician who is only focusing on his election results rather than 5 years ahead or something, a nation building.
There you go. And AVM Ikramullah Sahab, I wanted to ask you this also, that another point of contention which the the Prime Minister Modi's election, victory was based on was sort of the anti-Muslim stance in India, especially against the Indian Muslims in Kashmir. So naturally, if they step up the actions against the Indian Muslims in Kashmir, Pakistan, for us, it's a very sensitive topic. So it's going to end up causing a reaction from us naturally. So how are we going to counterbalance that with the peace efforts, say with Kartarpur, and then this going on against the Muslims in India? Obviously, that is a very sensitive point for Pakistanis and for PM Imran Khan.
Well, this indeed is a sensitive point for the people of Pakistan. But the fact remains that, as I said earlier, Sikh community is a soft underbelly of India.
Yeah.
And if we are able to facilitate them in their observance of religious rights and win their pleasure, win their support, win their sentiments, that is automatically going to exert a pressure on the Indian government vis-a-vis their minorities.
Right.
Secondly, while India's secular face has eroded to a great extent, and there are now voices heard across the world about the state of affairs vis-a-vis the minorities in India, that is going to be another driver for the Indians to review their this policy. Plus, I think the Modi government has played this card of anti-Muslim or anti-minorities, a security threat to win their elections. And whether they like to sustain this, knowing that it is not going to be popular outside Indian borders, and of course they are a part of this world community and they can continue, they cannot continue or afford to continue such a policy. So I think these are the two drivers which can influence the Modi government to review this policy. While of course there are other elections which are to come, and whether the Indian government or the Modi government wants to continue the same narrative and hope to win those elections is something to be seen. But as far as the people of Pakistan are concerned, I think we understand what has been happening in Kashmir over the years. We understand the rise of Hindutva in India, and we also understand the militant policy or intolerant policy of the Indian government. We recall Samjhota Express, we recall Babri Masjid, we recall what happened in Gujarat. They are all there in our memory. So if the Indian government is wanting to pursue that policy, I think we have not witnessed any sort of objection or criticism on Pakistan government's initiative to open Kartarpur corridor. Mm-hmm. So I think that should not be a worry for Pakistan. Mm-hmm. Pakistan's policy makers, whether Pakistan's continuing this policy of appeasement specifically to the Sikhs, not to Modi government, should be something which should be reviewed. And I think we should be quite comfortable in pursuing this policy.
Dr. Zafar, do you have any would you like to add something to that? What are your views on this?
About the Kartarpur?
No, about this generally the sentiments in India. I mean, we know that it's going to be, they're still going to have an anti-Muslim stance. So what do you think about that? How will that affect our sensitivities, being a neighboring country, being a Muslim country, and yet trying to make all these peace efforts?
I think that, let me here submit that this what happened in the 2019 general election of India, it has re-established what the founding fathers of Pakistan were articulating, assessing, and then they pursued this two-nation theory concept. It has re-established that in the Hindu majority area or country, minorities, whether they are Muslims, Sikhs or others, their future is very much questionable
dubious,
or
exactly.
That
yes.
was the important thing. But at the same time, we have seen that with the passage of time, and especially now what is happening in India, naturally being a neighboring state, we are very much concerned because spillover effects like radicalized forces, if they come into power in India, they are going to encourage the radicalized forces in Pakistan or in other regions.
Absolutely.
So that will be a spill, or political spillovers are always happen. and we cannot ignore them. And then finally, if you see in this context, we wanted to have a peace with India. We wanted to have you can say, rational engagement with India, I mean, based on sovereign equality. We wanted to resolve what you call it, this Kashmir problem with India. And if India is going for a straight terrorism and continuity with eliminating the Muslims in the valley and changing the Article 35A and then going to Article 370 of the changing, the BJP government, naturally it created a lot of hue and cry in the Indian occupied Kashmir, and we have seen already violence has increased in the occupied Kashmir, and that's why we had this Pulwama incident, and earlier there were many like these kind of incidents. So definitely there is a
And then even you have
political or
those,
instability in India, basically, and in that political instability, India is going to use mighty Hindu, you can finesse,
and any such
and that will
incident,
create a problem for us.
any such incident naturally gets blamed on
It will be-
Pakistan,
you are
regardless
right.
of any evidence being there. So naturally, we're going to be a little skeptical, but inshallah,
We should
hopefully
be careful and as well.
We should be
But of course, Kartarpur, what I think it was a right step in the right direction by the
Yes,
government of
absolutely.
Pakistan, which should continue. We
And
should
hope
be
for the
more rational, confident state rather than the Indians skeptical.
Absolutely. Professor Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, thank you so much for joining us, and AVM Ikramullah Sahab, thank you for joining us today and giving your very thorough analysis on today's topics. Now we're going to be talking about the developments in the stock exchange with Dr. Faisal Fateh, and we're going to be talking about how the current economic and financial situation in the country is affecting our markets. Dr. Faisal, thank you for joining us.
Assalamu alaikum. Thanks a lot.
First of all, I'd like to ask you is that what are we seeing in the trends in the stock market right now with this increase in gas and electricity prices and the inflationary pressures on the economy? What would you like to tell us about where do we expect this to be going, and what is the situation right now?
All right. A couple of things. First thing is I'm Faisal Fateh, not a doctor, so just to correct it. And secondly, regarding stock exchange, I think stock exchange is still pretty in an environment of uncertainty. Yes, it has stopped falling, but of course it depends upon how the companies would behave, what their payouts would be, how their profitability be. And with increased interest rate and overall business environment being, we are going through an economic cycle of recovery, or you can say consolidation cycle. So for that, I don't think so there's much charm right now in the stock market. But the good thing is at least it has stopped falling, and hopefully we are hoping that if people have realized or investors have realized that it has bottomed out, and there might be some value to be found if you start investing a little bit straight here.
Naturally, it's always a good time when markets are down to start investing. However, obviously, investors also have their concerns. For example, what is the impact going to be on the financial sector with a lot of people, because of the kind of sense of panic in the country, people are going and withdrawing their funds from the banks and all. Could this precipitate some problem for the financial industry?
I don't think so. I think so. Banks have a lot of liquidity, and I don't think so. There's like whole kind of a concept of run on banks is happening right now.
Okay.
I think people will be depositing more money in the bank because, especially investors, because the interest rate, the rate of return from banks would be far more superior than any other instrument right now.
Right.
Even with stock market, like if we talk about PE right now, our PE is around 7, 6. And still, the banks are giving you 12% to 13% without any risk. So I think so people will be going more towards the banks. Coming to stock market, of course, when the interest rate is high, stock markets just behave how the economy behave, how the companies perform in the economy. If you have high interest rates, the companies, they cannot keep on, expanding, and they cannot keep on increasing their sales based on that. Especially once your rupee here has devalued so much, and with increasing utility prices, increasing taxation, and stuff like that, it impacts directly on consumers because their disposable income decreases, and then it, of course, affects the industry as well. To give you an example, if you look at auto sector, because of rupee devaluation, we are seeing car prices jumping by almost $500,000 to $1 million rupees, right?
Yeah.
And with the interest rate at 12%, the auto financing would not be there. So with these two things, we could really see that in a couple of years, at least, when by the time we are not done with the consolidation phase in the economy, we don't see that much growth coming into auto sector. Same is the case with the cement sector. There's so much supply into it. Same is the case with pharmaceuticals, because most of their salt is imported. And with input prices as well as import prices going up, I don't think so that there will be that much happening in the economy, or that much growth can be seen by companies.
So, in your opinion, what is the safest place for investors right now to invest and, to feel a sense of calm and security, keeping in mind the economic situation right now and the uncertainty that they're feeling? What do you think about the future of the real estate sector as well?
Again, I think safest investment right now would be bonds, or short-term deposits, T-bills, stuff like that. Uh, Even with real estate sector, I think that there's a lot of supply. Yes, it used to be a lot of demand as well, because we our population growth, and it was expanding middle class and everything. Plus, we don't have that many cities. If you look at our urbanization happens in only the same cities, it keeps on going to those 10, 12, or 15 cities. We don't build new cities. So, of course, real estate was very lucrative, but now with the taxation, and I think so, uh, the real estate which was increasing, which was gaining prices because of speculation or because of investment, not because of those people who are trying to build houses. So I see a bit of prices falling in real estate as well, and bit of market going towards the cold end rather than towards the hot end. So I
Thank you
would
so
really
much, Faisal Fateh Sahab. Thank you for all your feedback and some very useful information for us. On some very positive and light, on a very positive and light note, to sort of reflect on the improvement in the security situation in the country and the law and order situation in the country, Pakistan has come around by leaps and bounds by improving its security situation, and this is reflected on the fact that the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are due to be visiting Pakistan later on this year. This is a very good development because naturally it does show that things have settled down and are much safer in Pakistan. And this visit of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, Prince William and Duchess Kate, is 13 years after any royal visit that was made previously, which was the 2006 visit of Prince Charles and Camilla to Pakistan. Previously, Queen Elizabeth II has visited twice in Pakistan in 1961 and 1997. And not to forget that Prince William's mother, Princess Diana, had also visited Pakistan in 1996 on a personal visit. And she also attended a fundraiser by Prime Minister Imran Khan at that time for Shaukat Khan Memorial Hospital. And she had also come and visited Prime Minister Imran Khan at that time, had welcomed Princess Diana. So it must be a very sentimental visit for the Duke of Cambridge. Britain is home to over 1 million people of Pakistani origin, and it has the largest diaspora in Europe. This also follows other positive developments, which is British Airways resuming its flights in Pakistan. So, thank you very much for joining us today, viewers, on World Today. Inshallah, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now from Sharmeen Ali. Allah Hafiz.
The Badshai Mosque or the Royal Mosque in Lahore commissioned